has completed over 700 land deals in the past 8 years. He's here to share insights on creating predictable cash flow. Please welcome Abi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel.
700 is a big number. You mustn't sleep.
It is a big number, but you have to do that kind of number to replace your salary, at least in our world.
Mm, mm. So 700 land deals in 8 years. What does a land deal look like? Because there's people who want to become landlords. There's people who buy their own properties. But what's a land deal?
So just a quick backstory. So I'm in the US, came to the US for my higher education, completed it, did 9 to 5 for 10 plus years, got burnt out, wanted to get into real estate, but did not want to take debt because I'm like Dave Ramsey fan, just want to be debt free for life kind of thing. So flipping houses was out, flipping apartment buildings was out, commercial properties were out. So we ran into a land strategy where you can buy land on the western coast of or western side of the United States, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, where you can buy these desert squares for like $4,000, $5,000 and flip them for like $10,000, $12,000. So I thought that was interesting. So, but I didn't believe it. I was like, yeah, who's going to buy this? Like, they don't have utilities. They don't, like hard to reach. You need like a 4x4. So I was like, okay, but it seems like few people are doing it. So let's give it a try. So we sent a bunch of letters out to vacant land owners to see if they wanted to sell their land. And most of them said no. But a bunch did, like 5% of people said yes. So out of those 5%, we negotiated and like two people, like we finally ended up closing these deals. So we bought them for like $3, $4, $5,000. At the time, eBay was big. So we listed them on eBay and we were able to sell these properties for in like couple of months and we like 2.5 extra money. So it was like, so this works, but how do we do enough of them so we can actually replace our salaries so we don't have to do 9 to 5s anymore? So that's how we got started. We, did few more deals. And eventually we realized for us to actually replace our salaries, because we're living in New York City, so we have like 6-figure salaries. For us to replace our salaries, we have to run it like a business. Right? We cannot just run it like a side hustle, which we were doing at the time. We cannot rely on eBay. We need our websites, right? So those kind of things, we started learning more about business, sales, marketing, and 8 years later, 700 plus deals, we replaced both our salaries, and now it's a 7-figure company.
Incredible. Who would have thought selling land on eBay?
Yep.
And my son was telling me the other day when we're going for a drive, he said, Dad, we can buy a star. So we can buy a star. He said, yeah, you can buy a star and you can name it after yourself. Some of these things do sound crazy at the start. Land for $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but you found a way to make it happen.
Right. Have you heard about this guy who sells land on moon?
I haven't heard of him, no.
So apparently he basically claimed ownership of the moon, and then he sells land. He divvied up. He created this whole system. He's like, well, I'm gonna start selling parcels. So someone buys like a piece of parcel on the moon, and he sends them a certificate that you're the owner. And apparently, no one has ownership of the moon, obviously. And he sent a letter to the United Nations or whatever that I'm claiming ownership of the moon, and no one responded to him. So he like, all right, by default, no one is saying no to me, so I'm the owner, and I'm gonna start selling these parcels. And he has made like hundreds and thousands of dollars. At this point, he might be in the millions. But and there was like this huge news article and like media coverage on what he was doing maybe like 5-6 years ago. And it's crazy. People love buying land. It doesn't matter if it's on the earth or or on the moon.
Well, people have bought crazier stuff, in my opinion. I think during the pandemic, we saw people buying NFTs
Hmm.
and whatever non-fungible token or whatever they called it. But people were spending dollars, hundreds, thousands, even
Right.
millions of dollars buying this artwork. And it
Yeah.
had no tangible value. But
Right.
something like real estate, I think one of the things that has stood the test of time, it's tangible. You know,
Yeah.
my father, he bought land in his 20s that was probably worth $5,000 back then, maybe
Mm.
£5,000, and he still got it. It's still there. Yeah, it can be taxed, but it's pretty hard to take away.
Yeah. Well, so unlike Bitcoin, gold, and all the other commodities, which you can't really, they're not really, you can't really do much with them. It kind of like, it's speculative, right? You just wait for gold prices to go up or the
Mm,
Bitcoin prices to go up. With land, you can actually do things, right? So a lot of people who buy land, they're not just buying for speculative reasons. Of course, there are some who think, well, it's in the path of the growth. City as the cities become bigger, they're going to annex more and more of the county land. Um, but there's actually people who use it. Like the number one scenario we look at is like people with RVs. People love RVs in the
mm,
US, right? Recreational vehicles. So there's giant big RVs. The thing with this giant big RV is like you can't just park on the side of the road. It's huge, right? So you need like a place to actually like piece of land to actually park it, because you want to, these are people who are retired, they're traveling all over the US. They don't want to pay like $60 or $70 a night every time they need to park their RV, because you park in like national
mhm,
parks and these private RV parks, and it's expensive.
mm,
So they buy these things because middle of nowhere Nevada, middle of nowhere Arizona, you're paying literally paying like $10 per year in taxes. So it literally doesn't cost anything to hold. So people buy these properties, they use it for recreational purposes. A lot of people have ATVs, They
mhm,
they ride their ATVs. Like you cannot ride, it's not legal to ride it on the streets. It's expensive to go to a dedicated ATV uh parks and stuff. So, they buy these lands and they, do their ATVs, they bring their kids. A lot of people like to do off-grid home, like a small homestead style gardening, like people like building sheds for storage, store their tools because storage is expensive. So people find creative ways to use this land, unlike gold and Bitcoin.
mm. Well, at $5,000 or ten or $12,000, it's cheap. But even if it's under $100,000, it's still cheap.
Yeah.
My parents are traveling around in their motorhome at the moment, and they find a lot of free camping places, but you can't afford to the average person can't afford to spend, 70 or 80 US dollars every single night. And if
Exactly.
you want to have your toys, you can't always have 60 or $70 worth of costs accumulating every day. That becomes so far out of reach for the average person.
Yeah.
With this land, a lot of people have this dream of escaping the 9 to 5. People, they like money, but they don't necessarily like what they have to do to
Yeah.
get the money. What are you seeing in the marketplace, or what did you experience when you were living in New York, where you really wanted to get out of your 9 to 5? What was the push?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest push was just the lack of control. Like I saw, like if I wanted, say, if I forwarded my life 10 years, 20 years, I could see where I would land in my corporate world, right? So it'll be my manager's manager, right? And my manager's managers was always stressed, right? They were always like running around. They did not look happy. So I realized I didn't really want that life. And especially working in New York City, it's like super big hustle culture, which it's totally fine by me. I'm not afraid of working hard.
But the problem is that it's someone else controlling your destiny, because there are like, you can't, you now, even in 10 years, I'm not guaranteed my manager's role, because it's totally possible that my manager's manager is still there. Like, for me to get that role, they have to leave. My manager needs to get promoted. I need to get promoted. Then I need to get promoted again. So you're not really controlling your destiny, and that kind of, like, chafed with my ambition. And also, I was dealing with some health issues. I had some migraine issues that I was dealing with, and I was like a little bit worried that if I'm not able to go into work, I might lose my job. So there are like certain health scares as well that kind of push me to like, all right, this is the time. I need to take this seriously. Um, it is, you did bring up an interesting point. Like, it is doable. Obviously, we have done it, and still doable, right? You can replace your salaries, but people, I have this mastermind. People apply to be in the mastermind, and I see that the mindset of people with cushy jobs, unless they have like an external factor kind of like forcing them, kind of like pushing them to take the leap, people are hesitant because they have like a big misconception of what entrepreneurship is. um they think it's about, they think they're going to be doing less work, which is like the biggest misconception. So it's more like, all these Instagram gurus and TikTok gurus, like, oh, you can make millions doing this, doing that. And that's what 9 to 5ers are thinking the reality is. And they, but what they don't realize is entrepreneurship, they'll be working twice as much as they were working in 9 to 5s. And the reason for that is, in 9 to 5, you're doing a very specific role. You're doing like IT or HR or legal or whatever, right? Whatever your day job is. And it's a very specific department. And within that very specific department, you're doing a very specific role. But when you switch to entrepreneurship, you are the legal department, you are the marketing department, you are the sales department, you are the information technology, you are the leadership team, you are you do the tax department, right? So pretty much you take over like all 9 or 10 big departments, and you are the single person, and that's how you're getting started. And you have to perform all those roles and somehow figure out to run a profitable company. So that's like the biggest misconception I see, because when people see those Instagram reels, make millions overnight, that's not the true story or the reality.
One person said it really nicely on Facebook this week, and it kind of sounded like this: ever since I become a business owner, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours crying. I looked at that and I went, oh, the punchline. It is different, isn't it, business? I remember I had been working with Emirates Airline. I'd moved to Dubai. I'd been there since 2007 through to 2012. They were early mornings, late nights. We were jet lagged. We had to put up with customers. We had to put up with delays. And we had a champagne lifestyle on a lemonade wage. You're flying around the world, first class, 5-star hotels. It's lovely, but you're not making enough money. You're making enough money to survive, but if you start to look to the future, you're not going to be very far ahead in 10 or 20 years. And so once I got into business again for the third time for myself in consulting, it quickly reminded me how cushy the 9 to 5 is.
Yes.
It's like, my gosh, somebody used to wash my clothes. Somebody used to pick me up and take me to work. Every time I landed in a foreign country, somebody put cash into my hands. They paid for my healthcare. They paid for all of that. And I quickly just realized what a privilege it is to have a 9 to 5. But it's also a curse.
Yeah.
You have to give up on a lot of your dreams, because there's a lot of careers that are absolutely limited in income. With Emirates Airline, I could have been the best leader. I could have been the best cabin crew. I could have given you the best 5-star service, but I'm just only going to get the same rate as everybody else.
Right.
And the only way to kind of get ahead was to make a lot of sacrifices, to go without a lot of things. But in business, it seems that, yes, we do have to sacrifice a lot of things, but the rewards are so much greater. You might not work 9 till 5. You might work from 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. Or you might work from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. But you don't have to sacrifice the dreams anymore. You can get the car. You can get the holidays. For some people, it's having the power. It's having control. Like, you know what? I wake up when I want. I go home when I want. I piss and shit and eat when I want. If I want a sick day off, I can have it, and I don't have to explain myself to anybody.
Right.
Some people love that control aspect.
Yeah.
Where other people start to look at the economics of it and say, well, I've got a skill here that could generate me $5,000 a deal. I could take my time and effort, buy a piece of land, flip it and get a 2.5x return. And I get to do it on my terms. That's very attractive, even if you're giving up a little bit of sleep, giving up a little bit of security.
Yeah, I noticed, the first thing I noticed when I quit my job and I was like 100% on the business was the stress feels different. Like you still have stress. So on the 9 to 5 side, I feel like the stress feels more stressful because you're not in control of the variables that's generating the stress. So for example, someone comes up with a deadline. Like I was in technology. Someone on the business side comes up with some sort of deadline. They pass it on to technology. Technology has to meet those deadlines. It was completely randomly generated by the business. And now it's like unrealistic. So we have to like fight to meet that deadline. And now within that deadline, we have like sub deadlines for every project milestone, right? So all of this, you have to join these meetings. You have to, be part of these scrums, right? So all of this is generating stress, but it's outside your control. You don't have any control on those variables. But on the entrepreneurship side, literally you're in control of your whole day's schedule. So, right. So you are in control of the variables. So, if you're lagging behind on a deliverable, you can put an extra 3 hours to meet that deadline, right? Which was set by you, right? So the fact that you are in charge, as you correctly pointed out, if you do whatever you do, whenever you want to do it, right? If you want to feel like taking a day off, you can do it, right? So the fact that you're in charge makes the stress less stressful. It feels more like a positive stress as opposed to a negative stress.
One thing I've noticed being business owner is I get to choose who I want to work with. And for me, that's the biggest blessing from God that I've ever had. Because when I was with Emirates Airline, I get 400 customers. And not all airline passengers are lovely people. Sometimes you see people at their very worst when they hop on an aircraft. But because you're in a salaried position, you have to tolerate them. If it was my airline, I'd say, get the fuck off the aircraft. Fuck off. But you can't. But that salary, you got to put a smile on that face. But in business, it's like in real estate. If you're negotiating on a piece of land, and you really don't like the landowner or the vendor, it might just be a one-time negotiation. Okay, I can tolerate this person for the next 3 months until the deal's done and I'll never have to see them again. That's cool. Rather than having to go to an office and see the same leader, the same manager, the same people day in, day out that you might not necessarily like, that you don't want to be in the scrum with, that you wouldn't invite home for dinner. Sometimes that little bit of extra stress, you can tolerate the other things. And for me, it's the acquisition of customers that I like to work with. I can look at people and I can decide today to sell or not to sell. Because if I sell and they're my client in consulting for the next year, now I've got to put up with them. But if I look at them and say, I don't believe in this person, I don't believe in what they're about. I just don't have to take them on. And that for me is I get my sleep back. I might lose a little bit of money, but nobody's going to come and slap me. My wife might, but there's nobody else to answer to. Those little freedoms, I think it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit of suffering financially until you find your way, but you can turn around that pretty quick. There was some good numbers years ago, and it said that the average person doubles their income around about every 20 years. And if you think about it, if you were serving food at a cafe as your first job and you're earning $15 an hour and you're now in your late 20s or early 30s, you might only be earning $30 an hour. So it takes you about 20 years to double your income. But high performers, people who are good at what they do, on average, they double their income every 7 years. So if you just get good at something, I see some guys in real estate, they're banking anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 million in GCI and commissions every year. They don't work any longer hours than anybody else. They're selling the same properties at the same prices for the same commissions. They just get really good at it.
Yeah.
And they can retire early if they want, or they can go and buy more properties and do more deals. But they got a choice.
Yeah. I mean, that was the biggest learning for me in the past 8 years. It's the education, right? If you know what you're doing, you can reduce the pain cycle, right? So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book. And the biggest principle, so it's more of a principles book, and the biggest principle I talk about, and this pretty much applies to every business. And when I learned it, it was completely blown my mind, is the amount of money a business makes is equal to the amount of goodwill you have in the marketplace multiplied by the number of offers you make to your customers. So what does this mean? So say I like to use the cafe shop example. So say we live in a small town, right? So we open Dan's cafe shop and Abi's cafe shop, right? So someone comes to Dan's cafe shop and they say, well, I would like to buy a small cappuccino. And as part of the conversation, you say, well, you should try out the large, we have this special going on, but, you get a free pastry with it, and you should try out the croissant, it's like one of the highly reviewed, you should try out, we have this artist, barista who can do like a foam art on your cafe, on your coffee, So as part of this conversation you're having with the customer, you make like 5, 6, 7 offers, right? So that's how you're running your cafe, right? I'm in the same town. Someone comes to my coffee shop and they say, I would like to buy a small cappuccino. And I say, here you go. And that's it, right? So I am only making 1 offer. You're making, say, 7 offers per conversation. And assuming both our coffee shops get 100 clients, 100 customers per day, you can imagine at the end of the year, your revenue numbers will be dramatically higher than my revenue numbers, right? I might have made $100,000 and you might be at $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, depending on the value of upsells that you were able to do as part of that conversation, right? So if you think about it, we're talking about education, we're talking about how hard entrepreneurship is, and obviously there are benefits to it as well, with the freedom and all those components. But education is a big thing, because if you think about it, most people that they run the coffee shop just like I just described for myself, where they just make 1 offer, and it's just a lack of awareness, right? So that's, if you want to make more money in business, you need to make more offers so you can generate more revenue. Now, you also need goodwill, because if you do not have goodwill, then if Dan makes more offers, people will be like, well, I don't really trust Dan. I don't know who he is. I haven't seen any content from him. I've never seen him in the community. Seems like he just came to this community, right? So you need goodwill in the marketplace to make these offers, because if people know, like, and trust you, they will be more inclined to take those offers, right? So
100%.
yeah, so education is a big thing. And because, it took us way too long to get to where we are. Like, just to hit 7 figures, it took us like several years. And if we were properly educated, if we knew how to do marketing, if we knew how to do sales, if we knew all these business concepts that you need to be deploying to run a successful business, we would have achieved success much faster.
In leverage, which is the title of the podcast, one of the most important forms of leverage is to get other people's knowledge. So important, because we don't have enough time on the planet for us to fail and learn our way through it. So we've got to leverage other people's knowledge. The other thing is we should also leverage other people's failures. And I think it's like when we're in the learning process, we're going to ask 2 questions. What did you do to succeed? Everybody wants to know that. What's the silver bullet? That's one thing, but you've also got to understand where other people have failed, because it's by having a look at those failures that you can quickly see the traps. Okay, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and do this, do this, do this. And a lot of the time, what I've seen in real estate is, it's like what you're saying here. Learn from the experts. Somebody's done it 700 times. It's taken them several years to become profitable, and now they've figured out the algorithm. It's like if you're just buying one property. I bought my first property when I was 19, and my uncle said to me, he said, Danny boy, get into real estate. And when you get into real estate, your job is to be a prospector. Pick up the phone and call 500 people per week. He said, out of 500 people that you call, 400 won't answer. 100 people will pick up the phone. Most people will tell you to go jump in the lake, but one person will be ready to sell. And he said, that's worth $7,200. Just keep doing that. And then he told me all the things that the other agents did that caused them to fail. So it's a very straight line to success. Okay, don't do this, don't do that. But I was also coachable and trainable. And do this. 6 months later, purchased my first house. And he said, okay, you've done the first one. Now let me teach you how to leverage. You've got equity into this. Let's borrow money that we don't have against this asset, and we'll get a second one. And the second one was the same thing. Call 500 people a week. 100 people will answer. Most will tell you to jump in the lake. One will be ready to sell. Do that. You'll have enough money. Go to the bank, do this and that. And there I was, 22, had my second property. And I wasn't intelligent. I dropped out of school at 17. I just asked somebody else, what did you do to succeed? And what do we have to avoid to fail? And I think that's a key concept. But it does come down to different personalities. When you see people investing in real estate for the first time, what are some of the attitudes that get in their way that prevent them from being successful? And for example, it's, some people just refuse to ask for help. They think asking for help is a sign of a weakness. What do you see in your field?
Yeah, it is an interesting point. I mean, what I'm seeing is a lot of, it really depends on the person's background. So if the person has a certain, so I'll give you a very specific example. So this guy, he's like, he's his Facebook friends with him for a long time. So he saw that I was doing this, I would do posts and everything. So when he was ready to quit his job, he reached out to me and he was like, well, I really want to, clearly you have done this. I want to replicate this same success. Would you teach me? And I was like, yeah, of course. So he joined my mastermind, we were doing all these things. So I'll give him step-by-step instructions, do this, do this, do this. And what I realized, and this happened multiple times, people if they know how to solve a problem, right? So he's coming from technology. He's coming from, more like solving tech problems. So he would spend most of his time, like he learned how to acquire properties, because that involves doing due diligence, working with softwares, using GIS software, making sure that the properties have access, they don't have any contamination, they have utilities, so all the due diligence aspect, all the technical side of things, he was able to pick up really quickly. And he would like buy, he would buy more and more and more properties, and he wasn't doing anything on the sales and marketing side. And I was like, well, clearly you have learned how to acquire the properties properly, and you build this nice website because this is part of your wheelhouse. This is, you already know how to do it. You feel comfortable, right? But sales and marketing, he has never picked up the phone and make an outbound phone call ever in his career, right? So he would go back. He's like, he tried once. He's like, this doesn't feel natural to me. It seems very salesy. Like I'm making outbound phone calls to people. I was like, but these are the people who requested more information from you to buy this property. So how would it feel? Why does it feel salesy if they are the one who's trying to buy the property, right? And he would like avoid it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's been like months. And I was like, bro, you got to sell these property. You have like, your inventory is bloated now. And if you don't sell, how are you going to generate revenue? And he kept on avoiding it. And he finally at now he's getting squeezed. Like he's seeing the bank balance kept going down. And now when he finally recognized, all right, now I need to take action. And then he was like, just like you said, you have to do like 500 or whatever phone calls before, you will actually do the sale. Finally, he started doing sales. He kept failing. He was like very awkward on the phone. He didn't know what things to say. And we were like, well, let's go back to the documentation. We have everything documented. This is the script. This is how it looks like, right? Do practice with ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT to pretend to be a customer. So he started doing that, and he started getting more comfortable. And then he finally did his first sale. And he was like, oh, okay, so this works. So he felt more confident, and now he's getting more and more comfortable, right? So the biggest problem I see is people coming from 9 to 5 because they have solved this one problem and they're really good at it. People tend to like to solving the same problems over and over again.
What I hear from there is a couple of different personality traits. One of my specializations is profiling, and I've profiled 10,000 people in my career. And what I can hear there is you've got an example where somebody's very compliant, high in conscientiousness, very good with rules and procedures, also systemic, the ability to follow the system. And through that, they were able to acquire the properties. It sounds like when this particular person has come into selling, what they fear, and all of us have this, it's a fear of rejection. It's triggered by hearing the word no. And what's interesting with this is most people have in their mind that they've got to be a salesperson like Jordan Belfort. I've got to be optimistic. I've got to be on the microphone. I've got to rally the troops. That's not what customers want. Customers don't want to be treated like that. But all of us have to learn to overcome that fear of rejection. And people who are high in influence tend not to feel the rejection as much because they like the attention of selling. They like having the conversations. They get energized when they have the conversation, so they want to pick up the phone more. But people who are low in influence really will do anything to avoid a no. They'll do anything to avoid the rejection. They'll hide behind the screen for as long as they can so they don't have to pick up the phone. And it's very common. And I think some of the best salespeople are the ones who don't want the attention anyway. They look at themselves more as a service person than a salesperson.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I was coaching a firefighter, very compliant, very conscientious, followed the rules, because you got to as a fireman. But at the same time, he would run into a burning building and pull somebody out and have no fear. But when it came to starting his business and he had to pick up the phone and he had to cold call, if he had to go and knock on the door, he said, Daniel, this is the most frightening thing I've ever done. He said, this is so scary. I said, scary? What you do is scary. Running into burning buildings every single day, that's life-threatening. He said, oh, that's totally normal. And I said, I would rather pick up a phone and speak to somebody than run in the burning building. And for him, it was just a matter of strategy. Once he realized that he had done things out of his comfort zone and all he had to pick up was a phone and follow the process just like he would don on his fire equipment, he was fine. And he became a very good salesperson because he really cared for people. But also in a very compliant industry where there's a lot of due diligence that has to take place, these people can answer the questions. They got the answers. Where a lot of salespeople are more intuitive and they're like, I'll just feel my way through the sales. A lot of salespeople get caught out on the details. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a numbers game, and it's also a skill, right? So at anything you try for the very first time, you're going to suck at it. And then the more you do it, the better you get. I'll give you a very specific example of rejection. So when I first, launched this book, The Land Business, right? So it has the word land and the word business. So my thought process was, so I'm going to reach out to real estate podcasts, and clearly they would want to interview me. And I'm also going to try reaching out to business podcasts because, it is a business book. So clearly they would want to interview me. So I had no problem getting onto the real estate podcast. People would be like, yeah, this interesting story. Love to have you on. But the business podcast, there were like some people who rejected me. And I was like, why? Why wouldn't you have me on your podcast? Because this is like pre-interview. So they're like face-to-face. So I was like, I want to know, right? I'm not afraid of hearing why. So tell me why you wouldn't have me on your podcast. It's like, yeah, I don't feel like it's a real business. It's more like a real estate. You're just doing real estate deals. It's not like a traditional business. I was like, really? That's what you think? Okay, that's good to know, right? And that kind of like, and that kind of like stung that, people don't think it's a real business. And that's kind of like motivated me to like start my own podcast where I was like, I would bring in other business owners and, we'll have this strategy session with them. And even on that, I got rejected by a lot of people. So I literally, when I send cold outreaches, like I don't do it anymore. I have my virtual assistant do it. We're literally seeing 19 out of 20 people saying no because they don't want to do a strategy session. They will be like, well, I can come on your podcast, but I will promote my thing, and I'm not going to have a strategy session with you. And that was crazy because I thought people would love that. People would like want to, have an honest conversation and an honest strategy session on what their business is, what challenges they're dealing with, and how they're thinking about those problems. But most people, they just want to, kind of like just promote their thing. And I realized a lot of these people who are rejecting are like really coaches who are actively in businesses or haven't done a business in a long time. They did it like 20 years ago, had a successful exit, and now they just do coach. And they don't want to talk about the coaching business. And they just want to talk about how they train, right? So I feel like rejection is part of any kind of successful venture. You will have to deal with rejection, and it's just a matter of skill. At this point, I just delegate all the cold outreaches, so I don't even feel the rejection. I feel like, well, my virtual assistant is getting rejected, not myself. But as you said, if you do it long enough, you'll stop caring.
I think through time, we get a thick skin. We get used to it, and we start to realize that no is never personal. We think it's personal because it's us, but we say no to businesses all the time. I think we've got to get to the stage where we deal with rejection like McDonald's. There's McDonald's on the freeway where I live, and there's probably 200,000 vehicles that pass it every single day. 200,000 people who drive past and don't stop today. McDonald's doesn't get upset. McDonald's doesn't go outside and slam down the roller doors and say, well, screw all you motherfuckers. If you keep driving past me and saying, no, I'm going to shut my business down. No, they know it's a numbers game. Just because you're driving past today, it's kind of like, no, not now. Not right now, but sometimes you're busting to go to the bathroom and you pull into McDonald's, you get a car park, you walk inside, you use their bathroom, and the law of reciprocity is triggered. You think to yourself, I'm here, I may as well get a bag of chips. Now, if 1,000 people do that every single day, they got $1 million business. But they don't take it personally. They are there and they know at one time in the future, you're going to stop. And if you stop in the car park, there's a really good chance that you're going to buy something. And if we look at McDonald's and real estate, they took food, real estate and business all together, just like you have land and business. And we're going to learn about that. And this takes time in business. It's like in my business, not everybody wants what I've got. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people love to just listen in and hear the stories of what I do. And they tell somebody else. And as you were saying before, it adds goodwill to the marketplace.
Yeah.
I have people who listen to my podcast, who never press like, who never leave a comment, but I might pass them once every 5 years and they'll go, oh, I listened to your podcast the other day. They're like, oh, wow. Better keep going. Yeah. Projection's a funny thing. We think it's a personal flaw within ourselves. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your product and service. Sometimes it's just in front of the wrong person. And if we get our targeting, which is a key part of selling, for people who haven't been in business, there's really 3 parts of selling. It's prospecting, presenting, and following up. And a full sales cycle salesperson has to do those 3 things. You got to go out and prospect. And it's in the prospecting that you find out who your buyers are. Now, prospecting originally comes from gold miners. And gold miners, for as much as they'd love to go out and dig up a big nugget of gold, they know it's just a pipe dream. It's a fantasy. But what they do is they go down to the riverbed and they just put shovel after shovel load of bedrock and silt into their pan. And they start to fosket and pan for gold. They're prospecting. It's the process of looking. And after they do that, they get a little bit of gold. They put it in their vial and it eventually all adds up. But there's one thing that's really important with prospecting is that you get your target right. It's like somebody looking for gold. You could have the best equipment in the world and you go down to the beach where there's no gold and you could dig all day, all week, and you'll never get any gold. You got to get your targeting right. You got to find out where the gold is and you've got to go right to that location. And it's like your business. There's going to be a particular person who buys this type of product and service. And so just go and speak to those people. And what happens is instead of speaking to 1,000 people and getting 1 yes, you'll end up speaking to probably 50 people and getting 5 yeses. But it's the targeting. But you learn that over time. It doesn't come in the first week, the first month, the first year. Could be a decade, but you got to figure it out as you go through. Yeah. And as you figure out the targeting, now things start to compound really quickly.
Yeah, targeting is important. Here are 2 more dimensions I will add to that, which we relatively recently found out were really important. And, please tell me your thoughts on these as well. So we took a lot of sales training to learn sales. When you take a lot of sales training, at least in the US, most of the focus tends to be on objection handling. Like people will, you'll be on the phone. They'll be like, well, I need to talk to my wife. Or they'll say, well, I don't really have the money. Or I need to think about it. That's my favorite. I really need to think about it, right? Well, let's think about it right now. Or like, something like that, right? And most of the sales training was like, well, so how do you handle these objections? How do you overcome these so you can make the sale? So most of the like the learnings that we had were like, well, you might say this, you might say that, right? But in reality, after doing this for 8 years, what moves the needle the most on the sales side is speed and availability. So what does that mean? So in land, when people go to buy land, this is like we're talking about like $10,000, $20,000 parcels. We're not talking about like very unique $150,000 parcels, right? People don't just say these are like external websites, land.com, landflip.com. People don't just say, oh, request more information. All right, I'm done for the day. I'm going to wait for that person to call back. I'm going to have my dinner now. People go request information, request information, request information, request information, like 20 times, right? So if you do not respond to that lead, right? Like our speed to lead used to be 4 hours. We'll be like, well, we have the rest of the day. We'll respond when we get to it. And what we weren't realizing that our competitor was responding within 30 minutes. So if my competitor gets to them in 30 minutes and I haven't even spoken to them, and it's pretty much it's like a utility at this point, right? Or commodity, because like it's similar land, similar desert squares. We're losing that sale. So when we at this point, our speed to lead is less than 1 minute. If we don't get to them within a minute, we assume we're going to lose the sale. And just to meet this metric, we had to hire 3 extra virtual assistants just to meet this metric, because we get like 40, anywhere from like 20 to 40 leads per day. So it was really, really important. And as soon as we implemented it, we saw like, the massive difference on our bottom line. So speed is one of them. The second is availability. So before we would, this is like the setter closer model. Our setter will set the call and the closer will close. And our closer calendar used to be like 1 to 4 p.m. 1 p.m., 1:30, 2, 2:30, 3 kind of thing, right? So 1 to 4 p.m., 30-minute increments. You can book a call and we're going to, try to close on that call. But then we realized there were certain people, these are like blue collar people, right? Who are work off hours. They, those are the times they're working, or they might be working, the only availability they have is early morning or late at night. And our calendar is only open during the afternoons. So what we did was we opened the whole day up, like 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And we opened it up at 15-minute increments. So you can imagine it like created so many more appointments in the day. And now we made it easier for the customer. Because before we used to think, oh, people will think we have too much time, we don't have enough business. So we're like artificially creating scarcity. And that was so dumb, because we're like making our customers' life difficult. People don't care about your availability of like if you have a customer or not. They're just thinking about themselves. They want to solve their problem, right? So as soon as we implemented these 2 features, responding to a new lead within 60 seconds and opening our calendar like whole day at 15-minute increments, we saw sales go through the roof.
I'm glad you say that. You said speed and
availability.
In my business, I say speed and ease. Because people are impatient. It's like when I go to McDonald's and I want to eat, I want to eat now. I have eaten every single day for the past 46 years, but most of us aren't good at planning our eating. We're going to eat breakfast, lunch, and tea, but we don't think about it. And when we get hungry, we get angry. And if somebody's ordering slow in front of you, you're bottlenecking around trying to figure out, how do I get this person out of the way? Even McDonald's, you'd go in at, like in Australia, you'd go in at 11 a.m. and they're like, the breakfast menu is finished. Who said so? I'm the customer. I want to eat breakfast whenever I want to eat breakfast. And eventually people like McDonald's started to listen and they just served all day breakfast because that's what people wanted. So you got to have speed. You got to have ease. And what you were talking about here with the response time, I was doing some research a couple of years ago, and it said that if you receive a web lead through your business and you call that person personally within 5 minutes, you have an 800% greater chance at closing the deal.
Yeah.
But you're saying now the customers in your service, you're doing it in 60 seconds. You've got to get in there because there's less buyers in the marketplace today with all businesses, and there's more sellers. And there's some very tough competitors out there. And sometimes the only thing that business people have today that differentiates themselves is speed. If I want to buy something, I want to buy it now. Why do I have to buy it when you say 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Why do I have to wait? Why do I have to do it? I think we're all past fake scarcity.
Yeah.
Scarcity is fake. No, if you want to buy it, let me give you the time that suits you. If you want to buy at 11 a.m., I'll be there. If you want to buy at 6 a.m., I'll be there. And I've started to change the way that we use scarcity in our business. I say to people, I'm available to speak to you for 15 minutes. And if you decide on the call that this is right for you, take it now. But if you don't take it now, just want to let you know, I won't follow you up. This deal won't be available. So if you want it, just take it. You're busy, I'm busy. And when people listen to that, they go, you know what? That's actually quite fair. He's actually quite honest. How many times do you want a salesperson calling you back? If you want it, just take it. If you want it at this price, you can have it now. But if you call me back later on, you can't get it for that price, or it's probably sold. The other thing is with scarcity, what I tell my people is tell them the price that you're selling it for today. Tell them the price that you sold it for yesterday, and tell them the price that you're going to put on it next week. And if you want today's price, take it. But this is the history, and I show that with my consulting. I worked with some real estate agents, and they used to do $100,000 months. Now they do $550,000 months. And I say to people, these guys started working with me in 2017. And back then, I did my first consulting gigs for free. I said the people who came after that the following year paid $100 for an hour. These people paid $250. I said my current rate is $750, and I'll be putting it up on the 1st of July this year. And they go, oh, wow. And I said, yeah, it only gets more expensive. It never gets cheaper. And when they see that there's no fake scarcity, it encourages them to make a decision. Because people think both with their hearts, but also with their wallets. And if they feel that this is fair and it's the right price and it's packaged and presented, they should take it there and then. There's no reason why they should call back. There's no reason why they should waste any more of their time. They're important people. They got things to do.
Yeah.
They got husbands to keep happy, wives to keep happy, children to feed. Just do it now. Speed and ease.
Totally agree.
There's a story that a gentleman, he went to a dentist. And as he was sitting there speaking to the dentist said to him, your teeth are rotting. And he said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, what I recommend is that you extract the teeth. He said, well, how much is it? He said, it's $80 to extract the tooth. And he said, $80 to extract a tooth? How long is it going to take? And the dentist said, well, I could probably do it in under a minute. And he said, $80 for a minute?
Yeah.
And the dentist smiled and said, is time your only concern? And he said, because if you want, I could pull it out slower. And the patient, being a very, very intelligent man, said, just get it over and done with. Now, Abi, where can our listeners learn more about the work that you're doing, more about your mastermind, or more about your book? Where can they follow you?
Right. So the book, The Land Business, it's available on Amazon. So I just launched it like a month or so back. I also do mastermind, so you can check that out at honestwealthbuilders.com. And yeah, and I offer free 15-minute strategy calls as well to see if it's a good fit or not. So yeah, please check it out.
Beautiful. We will put the details in the video below. So find somewhere on the screen or on the podcast, press that, and that'll take you straight to Abi's website. My friend, thank you for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.